The knife was in deep, maybe 20 centimeters or more. Anastasia was only a little older than Kieran, maybe 4 or 5. Tom couldn't remember right now. She was Esmeralda's youngest and not even a meter tall. Blood was pouring from the wound, but Esmeralda clearly knew not to pull out the knife, instead applying pressure to the wound. Still, this wasn't going to end well. Tom knew that. He could hear the kid struggling to breathe, a punctured lung most likely. The knife was a long, thin, dagger-like weapon, and it had cut through her entire abdomen and into her chest. There was nothing to be done. Looking around in the daze, he saw Dakota having rushed over to her mother, who was sitting against the wall. Her armor was stained with blood and gore, some of the more decorative features beaten to shit. Dakota looked to be trying her best to keep the old lady awake, tearing off the Nook's helmet to get to her. Tom just couldn't. Not right now. He couldn't deal with this, as he just sat down in the corner looking at the carnage around him, as others started rushing in. Fengi, Heron, and Rachuk came as well, followed by Volson a bit later. They were talking, shouting, and bickering, all of them tending to wounded. Tom just sat there looking at Esmeralda, holding her daughter, shutting out the noise. He knew what came next. As did Esmeralda, saving the last moments with her kid, who slowly stopped responding, closing her eyes. Why did there have to be this much crying? Looking to his right, Dakota was clearly trying her best to save her mother, hands glowing while Jackalope and Rachuk worked to get the armor off her. Why did this have to be this way? Tom wondered, as he sat there. Why did this happen? Was it because of him? Was it Volson? Had Kakashi been sleeping on his post? What about Heron? He hadn't seen or heard them coming. What if he had missed them before being relieved? How had they gotten in? Looking up, he saw Unkai trying to look him over. Tom looked down but didn't see anything wrong, really. Sure, his arms hurt and he was bleeding a bit from a few scrapes and the hole made in his left arm's armor. Go help them. He pushed Unkai off. I'm fine. He seemed to get the message, going over to Esmeralda, but there was nothing to be done there. Anastasia was long dead by now. Even if the kid was a decent healer, he couldn't perform miracles. Unkai went over to Nanook to lend a hand, helping Dakota out as best as he could instead. That stubborn old goat better make it, Tom thought. Dakota didn't deserve to lose her after what she had been through the last few days. Tom got back to pondering the question of what had happened, who was to blame. He got up, his body aching. Looking down, he could see he clearly wasn't as unscathed as he thought he was, having left a big red stain where he sat. Touching his neck, his hand came back red. It was just cut. It didn't matter right now. He walked over to the door to inspect it. It was almost undamaged. It looked like it had just been opened. The door was supposed to be locked and barred at night. The bar was lying on the floor, perfectly intact. Someone let them in. Tom went looking at the door. He turned to the figure in black lying on the floor. It would appear the bastard hadn't actually drowned in his own blood yet. As the figure looked at him, still clasping his throat, lying very still, Tom knelt down in his chest, bringing up the knife. Can you still talk? He questioned. There was nothing but a strained gurgle in response. Esmeralda, could you come over here? Bring that. Tom pointed to one of the revolvers lying on the ground. Those things really didn't deserve to be dropped like that, but they were sturdy after all, as long as he didn't drop his rifle. The grieving mother looked up with a gaze hard enough to cut diamond as she handed her kid over to Rachuk, picking up the revolver. Tom held out his hand for the gun as she handed it over. Tom emptied the weapon and loaded a single shot, cocked back the hammer, and released the safety. Your kill. Go for the eye, Tom went, handing off the weapon. Esmeralda knelt down on the black figure, pushing the barrel into the eye of the figure, snarling like a tiger, and pulled the trigger. You killed my kid, monster. The body gave a jolt, then was perfectly still. Tom picked up the other revolver and reloaded. He still had a target left somewhere, and he had a good idea who it was. Rachuk and Volson came over to Tom before they got the chance to ask questions or make demands. Tom went, We have a traitor to find. Bar door and follow. He went, turning to leave. Tom walked out the armory at a brisk pace, gun held at the ready. He didn't care for any more surprises in these corridors. None presented themselves, though. As they climbed up the levels, they saw Shiva, also badly wounded, and Balathon trying to tend to her. Tom went to the Grand Hall to see Kakashi and Tybalt placed on tables, being cared for by Puma and Sapphire. Sitting in a chair watching the proceedings was Dashu. Tom holstered his gun, walking up to the guy standing in front of him. The bastard didn't even have the decency to be helping out, despite being practically unscathed. Bad conscience? He questioned the dragonette, who looked up with a start. What do you mean? He answered in a false calm. Why didn't they kill you? Tom demanded. I guess they wanted the captain more. I'm fairly new here. Volzan interposed himself now. Tom, what exactly are you going at here? You run, you die, Tom stated, pointing to Dashu, trying to walk over to Kakashi lying on the table. You alright there, buddy? Tom asked the wounded guard. It was clear Kakashi had the shit kicked out of him. Yeah, I'll live. I suppose I should be glad they wanted prisoners. Very, Tom answered coldly. They were let in the door. Kakashi, we have a traitor. Why would we let them in? We didn't. Where was Dashu, do you know? Tom needed proof of what he was planning on doing next. Well, he wasn't in the infirmary. I was having a chat with Tybalt about his time as a mercenary. I thought he had gone for a walk. He'd been lying there since they got here, so who could blame him? Thank you, friend. That did the trick, as Tom turned back to Rachuk and Volson. Traitor needs motivation. We didn't know about Fancy Knife, only you and Escorts did. Traitor, one of you. Only one of you not accounted for at time. Tybalt in infirmary, you and two others in the Grand Hall. Rachuk's face turned into an angry scowl, turning to walk back to Dashu. Volson just stood there looking at Tom. I'm so sorry. I didn't know, I swear. Volson went desperately trying to apologize. Tom believed the traitor. Unless he was the best dragonette he had yet to meet when it came to hiding his feelings, he had no clue he had brought a traitor along. Besides, why would he be the traitor? He had the thing they wanted. I believe you. Soon I will know for sure. Tom walked by the stunned trader, who just looked around the hall, then up to Archon's head, who was again hanging over them. What did we do? Rachuk was standing opposite Dashu, staring him down. You stand accused of treason against the people who hired you and of aiding the enemy to enter the home of those who gave you shelter and care. How do you plead? I didn't do anything. I was just walking around when they came. I couldn't run or fight. I could barely walk. Tom drew his revolver, flipping it around in his hand, and whipped the guy on the side of the head with the butt, sending him sprawling to the floor. Rachuk, what is the punishment for guilty? Tom asked. Death, Rachuk answered plainly. Excellent, listen up. Tom stood over Dashu looking down. You will die, yes, but I will make you wish for death. It will be a reward for telling me what I want to know. Tom was doing his best to sound as unrestrained as possible, not hard following what he had just seen, and he had the guy to blame now. Rachuk seemed taken aback a bit, but didn't budge or say anything. What? No, you can't, Dashu stammered out. Give me some rope, Tom demanded. A puma came over with some, looking worried. What are you planning on doing, Tom? What do we do to child killers? Tom answered grimly. No, don't tell me. A puma went pale, stumbling a bit. Father, you better get down there. Mother needs you too, Rachuk added. A puma set off running down the stairs as fast as he could. Tom knelt down in order to start tying up Dashu, being met by a fist to his faceplate. It hurt like hell, but the faceplate did its job. You can't just do this to me. I didn't do anything. You aren't allowed. Who do you think you are? Tom just kicked him in the face with his steel-tipped boot, sending teeth flying. Your worst nightmare. Tom grabbed him by the shoulder, flipping him over, and began tying him up. With Rachuk's help, it wasn't hard. Tell Shiva I borrow Smithy, he said to Rachuk, grabbing Dashu by the horn, and began dragging him off. There was no need to be gentle. Tom did consider switching to his feet for going down the stairs, but elected not to. Dashu would need a clear head for what was to come. Sapphire stood next to Kakashi, tending his wounds, looking at Tom as he dragged Dashu off down the stairs. She had never seen him be cruel before. He was now, though. She was a tad scared of what he was planning on doing. Rachuk came over again, looking at her. How are they doing? They will be fine, only a little banged up. He got the worst of it. She gestured to Kakashi, on the table, who looked at Rachuk. Who did they kill? Kakashi's voice was quivering, clearly having heard Tom call Dashu a child killer. I'm sorry, old friend, Tshirt answered, laying his hand on Kakashi's chest. We lost Anastasi. Kakashi just broke down crying as Sapphire took a step back from the guard. They had failed. They had lost a child. Only yesterday there had been celebration and joy. Earlier today they had joked about Tom and Jackalop's escapades. How could this happen? Volson had gone to talk with Tyborg about the situation they were now in. The two were clearly trying to figure out how this had happened. Sapphire made her way into listening range. But I don't get it. It was just a knife. It wasn't even that expensive. Why do they want it so much? Tyborg protested. Not to mention I had the thing for months now. Maybe someone recognized it as Bartolion, the captain answered. Maybe, but why didn't they just buy it then? Didn't somebody try? Well, yes, but he wasn't even close to affording it. He tried singing it afterwards too, come to think of it, even if it was a sorry attempt. Maybe he told someone he shouldn't have. But why would that lead to Dashu betraying us? He's been with us for over a year. He seemed like a good kid. Damn if I know. I think we will soon, though. I don't know what that Tom guy is, but he bleeds red, so most of that wasn't his. And the noise. It sounded like Ark was loose down there. Let's just hope he doesn't kill Dashu by accident. Sapphire shuddered at that. She had seen Tom sad and scared before, and she knew anger well enough. The way he had just dragged Dashu off, that wasn't fury. That was hate. I saw how the corridors looked down there. He ripped them apart. I've never seen anything like it. This was when Fengi came up, telling them to get down to the infirmary. There were more wounded to tend to, including both the Kota and the Nook, who was apparently in very bad shape.